and founder of the National Action Network, the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. No justice,
no peace.
No justice,
No peace.
No justice,
No peace.
No justice,
No peace.
What do we want?
Justice.
What do we want?
Justice.
What do we want?
Justice.
When do we want it?
Now.
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 Fist bump the person next to you. Tell them you love them. National Action Network Change Ensemble, give them a big hand. Give them a big hand. Certainly we're happy to be with you another Saturday morning for the Saturday Action Rally and for you that are here live at the House of Justice, 145th Street and Lenox Avenue, and for you that are listening live on 1190 WLIB AM in New York, and you watching us live stream all over the country at nationalactionnetwork.net. We're happy to be with you another Saturday to give a report on where the action is. Give a hand out, Presider Attorney Michael Hardy. Give a hand to our inspirational preacher this morning, Reverend Waterman. Reverend Waterman got ready to close because we're on the time, but I told Dominic he got to get Daniel out that den. Don't close him too quick now. Don't leave Daniel with the lions. I want to know what happened in that den. Give him another hand, Antioch Baptist. Give a hand to our candidate for mayor who's running for mayor, a brother, I started making him an attorney, but he's not. Brother Ray McGuire is with us this morning. And we heard from Senator Benjamin running for controller and dealing with Shawana Vaughn and the work that he's doing around this law. We are very supportive of Shawana, and this issue of mental health and incarceration is not a their issue, it's an our issue. And I think that we need to begin to deal with these issues like we understand we are one family. People that are in your family that are incarcerated is still your family that's just incarcerated. Don't act like they're not your family. And people that have mental issues or mental health issues are still your family. And if we do not start acting as if we are one family, we will never be able to resolve these problems. Some of us never identify with a problem until we are in trouble or are the problem. So I'm very happy to work with him on Shawana on this issue, and as I said, he's running for city council and Ray's running for mayor. I'm the only one up here not running for nothing. What you running for, John? You running for something? I'm not running for anything, but we have all the candidates come by because we need to be informed on what they're talking about. One of the things I've learned in politics is don't let the media tell you what they're saying. Let them come tell you themselves. And if they don't want to tell you, then they don't want you to vote for nothing. Warren Waterman, ain't you running for something? City council. He's running for city council. I told you everybody up here running for something. He's running for the city council, Reverend Waterman. That's why he was messing with Daniel and that then. I get it now. All right. Give him another hand, Reverend Waterman. I want to get to several things, but let me start by saying that we are certainly all in prayer for those in Texas. We have two members of our national board, Reverend Anderson and Reverend Ralph West, who pastor major churches in Houston, Texas. And what has happened in Houston and all of Texas and the rural areas of Mississippi is something that we are concerned about and something that we clearly need to be praying for those to survive. The whole setup, the infrastructure that the state took over, and then as the state took it over and it faltered, this governor down there has played all kind of excuse games rather than dealing with the flaws that could have been dealt with, but they chose and did nothing about. And then in the middle of that, the senator decides he's gonna go to Cancun while members of his state, citizens, constituents, sitting with no electricity, no lights, no heat, and no water. And he decides to go to Cancun. And then when they catch him, he said, well, my 11 and 12-year-old daughter made me go. What this man is trying to get away with, I'm talking about Senator Cruz now, is a moral disgrace. You know, it's bad enough to lie. But to throw your children in front of the bus shows no moral character at all. But it shows the insensitivity, which is why we need to put people with compassion and sensitivity in office. It shows no sensitivity at all. I mean, I don't understand how you could leave people that are in that kind of situation. Let me bring them on in. Attorney Ben Crump, our civil rights attorney, is in the house. He's going to be joining us in a minute. How people can, Attorney Crump. How people can just, in their own way, disrupt and discredit an election. This is what Cruz did. And then turn around when people are in his own state, in the dark, in the cold, can't get food, can't get water, and he goes to Cancun and then lies about it, blame it on his 11 and 10-year-old daughter, while his wife was sending out text messages telling all their friends that had money, beat us in Cancun. The rates are down. This man is the one that was the one that stood on the floor of the Senate and said, don't certify the electoral college votes, and said he was standing up for the people. Well, we see what kind of standing up for the people he was about. Leaders don't run from trouble, they run to trouble. When Katrina happened, I wasn't a senator from Louisiana, but I went to New Orleans, and others went. Flint, Michigan, we went to Flint, Michigan when the water was polluted. We didn't go the other way, we went where it was. He left trouble. And I think that we need, as I said to Reverend Anderson and West, who are on our national boards, we are with them to do whatever they need to do to get Cruz on a cruise out of Texas permanently. Let me also say this, that we are dealing with the whole question, as you see what is going on in the state of New York, and I'm on live on LIB, so I want our New York crowd. All of this, what's going on with the nursing homes and Cuomo and all of that, in the middle of all that, don't forget that the underserved communities need their testing and their vaccine. Don't, in the middle of this, miss the point. And you know when they mention underserved, they talking about us.
Amen.
Some of y'all might think that underserved, they talking about somebody else. You are underserved.
Make it plain, make it plain.
Because some of y'all don't understand when y'all get an alias name, that's you. That means we get tested last, the vaccine last, but get sick and die first. We got to turn that around. And that's not going to turn around unless we address it. And lastly, and I'm going to bring in our point today, I want to say that I watched, as many of you did, the Henry Louis Gates special on the Black church. And it cleared a lot of the history up. One of the things, Waterman, that I liked is where they talked about in the beginning of the post-slavery era. That y'all gonna have to quit all this moving around. In the beginning of the pro-slavery era, that we had shacks that we meet, praise shacks.
Yes, sir.
And that was the only place we could meet. And from there, it developed into churches, but it was not only where they could worship, but it was where they could gather, because slaves were not allowed to congregate.
Yeah.
So when they met for their prayer service or their praise service, they also could say, well, you know, so-and-so had a baby down at Mr. George's plantation, or so-and-so died at Mr. Jones' plantation. That was where the church started. The church has always been more than what outsiders thought it was. It was our political headquarters, our economic headquarters. It was our education headquarters. And that is why it has to be built that way again. Now, when we go all the way through the African American experience and get to Dr. King, Dr. King and them formalized the social arm of the black church. It is no accident that the name of Dr. King's organization was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Y'all with me? Which means he identified that that was a church-based organization. In the ACP, there were legal questions and that kind of mobilization. CORE was dealing with nonviolent protest. Urban League dealt with corporate and interrelating in the private sector. SCLC was church-based nonviolent protest. Out of SCLC came Operation Breadbasket and other things. Breadbasket is where I started as youth director, church-based. Reverend Jackson started saying, well, you know, I'm not pastoring a church, Dr. King. Watch this now, because a lot of y'all be talking and don't have no background. Dr. King pastored Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. When the boycott was a success, he left Dexter to co-pastor his father's church. Let's welcome our Impact Television live all over the country coming on live now. Dr. King left Dexter to co-pastor his father's church so he'd be free to be available all over the world. We then see Reverend Jackson, who never pastored a church. Why? To be free all over the world. Started having Saturday meetings. We picked that up in NAN because I grew up under Reverend Jackson, Reverend Jones. Never pastored, so we would be free to pastor everywhere. I couldn't run with Ben to Minneapolis or wherever else if I had to be there to do Bible study Wednesday night, marry your daughter Thursday morning, bury your uncle Friday, and then break up and testify for your divorce that I married you for on Thursday. Pastor got to do all of that. By not pastoring, then all of the pastors could support us because we're not competing with them. If you pastor and they say, I ain't going up there to Sharpton's meeting, he might take my members. All your members can come here on Saturday because they're going to you on Sunday. So there was a strategy. There was a strategy that I keep telling y'all don't know how to organize. The idea of Saturday was you're not competing with Sunday. You're not pastoring. So we become the social justice arm of the black church. That's why 2/3 of our board are black pastors. Y'all don't know we think this stuff out. So I was glad that Henry put a little all of that in his profile. Let me say, when we are dealing with bias and racism, you cannot be against bias against you if you're not against bias against everybody. If you think that people ought to care about you and you not care about them, you have a limited strategy and a low level of morality. When I heard former President Trump continue to give a racial and national kind, a nationality kind of rhetoric to the coronavirus, I knew that he was speaking against Asians just like he had Africans. Just like he called African nations and Haiti S-hole countries. He tried to blame Asian Americans for coronavirus, that if he had done his job and listened to the CDC, we would not have had the level of death and the level of illnesses that we had. The results are that we've seen a rise in bias incidents, hate crimes, and outright viciousness against the Asian American community. Black folk have suffered more than anybody in this country, and we should not have laryngitis while we see Asian Americans treated the way we have been treated. There are issues that we always have in our communities. I'm gonna have a task force. I want Joe on that task force. He's talked about this morning. We got to deal with our interrelations. But we do not need to be anything but unequivocal in standing against the rising hate against Asian Americans, because we know what hate feels like. And if anybody ought to stand together, it's us. So tomorrow there is a case of Damon Hall that we're going to Foley Square. There's a press conference and rally tomorrow that I'm going to stand with Attorney Ben Crump. And many of you, it's 2 o'clock after church. I'm not telling you don't go to church. Most of y'all going virtually anyway now. And we're going to stand with that. But I've asked them, and I know we on red TV time now, but I'm going to ask, I asked my friend, State Senator John Liu, to come and be with us. Because when we have fought in this country against racism, bias attacks, I don't care what the issue is, from Sean Bell to Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, John Liu was always here. John Liu fought when blacks faced bigotry. I didn't have to call him, he would call me. And as I began hearing about the rise in racial attacks against Asian Americans, he didn't have to call me, I called him and said that we want to take a stand with the Asian American community against hate. Let's welcome for a few words, State Senator John Liu.
No justice, no peace. Thank you, Reverend Sharpton. This is the House of Justice. I consider this my own home. I've been here a lot of times, sometimes as a candidate, but more often as not a candidate. I'm not running for anything not this year. Maybe next year I'll run for re-election. But I'm glad to see that we have many candidates for different offices here. And I'm a little caught up for words because Reverend Sharpton's words they really touch me very deeply. This is a man who is known as a national activist. He speaks so much, so powerfully on issues concerning African Americans. But this is a man that I've known for a long time who speaks on issues affecting everybody. And I was so touched that he reached out to me about the rise in Asian American attacks, anti-Asian attacks here in New York and around the country. And it's been happening for over a year now, for over a year since we were afflicted by this global pandemic. Global pandemic that's been killing millions of people around the world. Thousands of our fellow New Yorkers, hundreds of thousands of our fellow Americans. And as this coronavirus raged through our communities, the Asian American community, which I'm a part of, I'm Asian, I've been Asian my whole life. The Asian American community faced a double virus of hatred and bigotry. Whereas Reverend Al said, we were blamed, scapegoated for this virus that 45 incessantly called the China virus or the Kung flu. And his rhetoric, despite the advice of community leaders, of advocates, of health and public professionals, public policy professionals, to say that it would be inaccurate and downright derogatory to continue to use those terms. 45 didn't care, he kept using it. And that had a direct connection to the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes, outright attacks. And this has unfortunately not subsided. Just this past week, on Tuesday, a woman was shoved to the ground violently by someone who, according to her daughter, was screaming anti-Asian epithets. She wound up in the hospital. This past week alone, we have seen at least 3 incidents around the country, not only here in New York City in Flushing, but in Washington or the Washington, D.C. area. In San Francisco, we have seen attacks against Asian Americans, sometimes with explicit racial terms, and sometimes not so overt. But as an Asian American, we understand when we're being singled out for one reason and one reason only, and that is the color of our skin, or some would say the angle of our eyes. That is bigotry at its worst, and we cannot stand for it here in New York or anywhere else in this country. I also want to mention something about what Reverend Al said about this case that we're going to be talking about tomorrow. And I don't want to get into it too much because we have a big case. We have a press conference tomorrow, and Attorney Ben Crump is here. But we are unfortunately no strangers to the killings of innocent people at the hands of law enforcement. And that has happened repeatedly and unacceptably in the Black community.
Yes. Yes.
Sometimes, though, Asian Americans are involved also.
Yes.
And there was one young Asian guy, 19 years old, who was gunned down by the police. And originally the police said that he was waving a gun at them. Later on, a video surfaced where Christian Hall, the young Chinese guy, had his hands raised in the air. And then you heard the bang, 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 and then he held his stomach and collapsed. It's a big, big case, and Attorney Crump, thank you for taking it on, and Reverend Sharpton, thank you for standing up against this injustice. We need to get to the truth. And perhaps the video doesn't show everything, but there's got to be a full investigation at least. And we can't just take one side's word for it. And the devastation that Christian Hall's mom and dad are going through, it's unspeakable. I was talking with them, and they couldn't stop crying. And Christian, a young Chinese person, 19 years old, he was adopted. He was adopted when he was a baby from China. His mom is Asian American, his dad is African American, and they have raised him as a Christian since he was a baby. And they said to me, they could not imagine how he would even get or have any desire to get his hands on a gun. And to me, I find it unfathomable for anybody to say that he was waving a gun at police, no less. But we'll get to the bottom of this, won't we?
We'll get to the bottom of it.
Yes. I don't want to overstay my welcome. The last thing I want to say is, Reverend Sharpton is no stranger to the issues and the conflicts and the challenges that Asian Americans have. A long time ago, when I was young and I had hair, I was a new city council member. And one day I woke up, and on one of the biggest radio stations here in this city, they had a song, a parody. And it was a parody about the South Asian tsunami that had just killed 250,000 people. This is in 2005. 250,000 people died or drowned in that tsunami. And this radio station sought to make a parody using the tune of We Are the World, no less. With lyrics like, did you find your mother? I just saw her float by. Screaming chinks, little Chinamen being swept away. I mean, these are lyrics that I will never forget. And Reverend Al got in touch with me, and he said this was a big problem. And he ultimately secured a $1 million offer from the owner of that radio station to be contributed to tsunami relief. So Reverend Al, I want to personally thank you for what you have done specifically for the Asian American community. And I want to thank all the brothers and sisters here at the House of Justice and across the country on radio and live stream for understanding that we're all in this together. An attack against any of us is an attack against all of us. Thank you. No justice, no peace.
Give him a big hand, Senator John Liu. And we stand with him. I want some of Christian's family is here, and I want them to know the Hall family and Attorney Crump can have them stand. But in this room, you have the mother of Eric Garner, Gwen Clark. In this room, you have one of the brothers of George Floyd. Give him a hand with us this morning. In this room, are known all over the world as the Central Park Five, that Trump tried to get executed, but DNA freed them. One of the Central Park Five here every Saturday. Stand up. And the reason we all here, because we all fought together. And we all are going to keep fighting together. And we're going to fight with the Hall family together. Unfortunately, we don't have those in the justice system all the time on our side. So from time to time, every era, somebody has to take the point in different areas. And we've tried to take the point in the civil rights direct action area of National Action Network. But who took the point from Johnny Cochran and Thurgood Marshall before him and has become the Attorney General for black and brown and now red and yellow America that don't have an Attorney General. Let's hear some words from Attorney Ben Crump.
We stand against violence. We stand against discrimination, and we stand against bias. But before I begin to make the case about Christian Hall, I want to acknowledge my mentor, my confidant, and many times my co-counsel. He's not a lawyer, but he plays one on TV better than anybody I know. You know, I always heard my mother and my grandmother quote the scripture, I was glad when they said, let us go into the house of the Lord. As a freedom fighter who was raised up in the church, I say that. But every time I'm in New York, I say in my heart, I am glad when we say, let us go into the house of justice to see my mentor, the civil rights leader of our time, Reverend Al Sharpton. Yeah, I mean, and Senator Liu, the reason why I call him the civil rights leader of our time, because every time I have called on Reverend Al and many others, even before the cameras get there, before people start talking about it on social media, he always answers the bell. He answered the bell back in 2012 when I called on him when Trayvon Martin was walking home with a bag of Skittles and a can of iced tea, and the neighborhood watch volunteer profiled, pursued, and shot him in the heart. And we all learned about stand your ground. Well, Reverend Al answered that bell, and then a little while later, I called him about Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, who was shot, as many of the neighbors say, like Christian Hall, hands up, don't shoot. And all the black people out there witnessed it, but the state attorney took the police officer's word as the gospel. Well, Reverend Al answered the bell then. And then when Stephon Clark was running into the grandmama's backyard out in Sacramento, California, I called him then. And Reverend Al answered the bell then. When Terrence Crutcher was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, walking away in broad daylight. This is hands up, don't shoot, in broad daylight on video. The policewoman shot him in the back and killed him. Reverend Al answered the bell then. I mean, Botham Jones in his own apartment eating ice cream. Police come to the wrong apartment, allegedly the woman shoot and kill him. Reverend Al answered the bell then. I mean, it gets so deep because I think about all the injustices we fought over the years, and then we come to 2020, where it seems like, Reverend Al, everything has shut down in America because of the coronavirus pandemic, except implicit bias and police brutality. Because Ms. Gwen Carr on February 23rd, 2020, young man in Brunswick, Georgia named Ahmaud Arbery, jogging while black, was lynched. Called Reverend Al Sharpton, he answered the bell then. Then a month later, March 26, 2020, our sister Breonna Taylor, innocent black woman in her own apartment. The Louisville Metropolitan Police executing an unnecessary, unjustifiable, and senseless and illegal, no, not one, at 1 in the morning, busted in the front door and executed this young queen, leaving 6 bullets in her body while she was practically naked. And oftentimes, many sisters, when they're killed by the police, don't get the same attention and recognition that even brothers and others get. As Malcolm X said, black women are the most unprotected, the most disrespected, and the most neglected people in America. But thank God, when I called Reverend Al about Breonna Taylor, he answered the bell then too. And I have a 8-year-old daughter, and I know Reverend Al have daughters, and every time I think about Breonna, it makes us get so emotional because we try to protect all our children, but fathers really try to protect their daughters, and you just can't think about your child being killed by the people who's supposed to protect them in their own apartment. And then, as we're grappling with that, I get a call in the wee hours of the morning. May 26th, because the tragedy happened on May 25th, 2020. And I get that call, brothers and sisters here in the House of Justice, and I can't believe it, but then the family tell me, Attorney Crump, just go to social media and type in the name of George Floyd. And I watch the video that over 30 million people have viewed on YouTube alone, probably another 50 million on other platforms, but I watch as George Floyd is literally tortured to death for 8 minutes and 46 seconds with Officer Derek Chauvin of the Minneapolis Police Department knee on his neck while he narrates the documentary of his own death. He says 28 times, "I can't breathe." I mean, the lay people out there begging the police, take your knee off his neck. And literally, they offer him no professionalism, no compassion, no consideration, and no humanity. And George Floyd takes his last breath out on that street as Reverend Al and I conversed. That ambulance was his hearse that we see at the end of the video. And the first person I called, Terrence, after I got off the phone with his family, before it started hitting the news and galvanizing cities across the country and even across the globe, State Senator Liu, the first person I called early in the morning, you remember, Rev, was Reverend Al Sharpton. And just like all the times before, I'm so thankful that he answered the bell. And Terrence, if you'll just stand up for a second, not only did he answer the bell, I think, and I was amazed at the eulogy in Minneapolis, Minnesota, when he said, black people in America is telling America to take your knee off of our neck, all of our neck. I mean, it was mind-boggling. I'm just telling you, as an intelligent person, listening to him deliver that eulogy at the memorial in Minneapolis, and I was challenging him somewhat. I said, well, when we got to Houston for the final homecoming, Terrence, you remember, I said, well, I don't know how you're going to top Minneapolis. I mean, everybody was talking about, it was on the front page of most newspapers after he did what he did in Minneapolis. Black America demands America to take your knee off our neck. That's what we all been saying. But then he came to Houston, Texas, where George Perry Floyd was born. And with Terrence and Philonis and Bridget and Rodney and all, LaTanya, Jaja, all his family, his children, he stood up there and probably gave one of the most mind-boggling eulogies ever preached when he talked about his roots and he talked about his connection to the South Carolina Senator Throne Thurmond, and that we don't have a lineage for black people. There's not a place where we get to go back and trace our roots because they took that away from us. But we were going to give George Perry Floyd a legacy, America, because his life mattered. And that was so deep, because that's what we're doing when we say Black Lives Matter. We're trying to give a legacy to those who were killed and marginalized and swept under the rug as if their life didn't matter, as if they didn't exist. And Reverend Al said in that eulogy that we will give black people a legacy in America. So I am thankful to my mentor, Reverend Al Sharpton. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Terrence. And so I say all that just as a build-up. I'll be brief, Rev. I get emotional sometimes because I think about the battles we fight. You know, many people only see the glamorous part of it, but it is a struggle for the marginalized, the disenfranchised, and victimized amongst us, like State Senator Liu, Christian Hall. And we have his family here, and I'll have them come up just for a brief second so you can see who we're talking about. Nicole Enriquez, and you want to come on up? I want them to see a picture of this young man, if I could, Rev. And I apologize. We're in the House of Justice. May it please the court, Reverend Al. Yes, I want to get permission from the court. Yeah, this is Nicole Enriquez, the cousin of Christian Hall. This 19-year-old Chinese teenager who was having a mental health crisis in Pennsylvania. He was contemplating suicide on a bridge because he had broken up with his girlfriend. And you all remember when you were teenagers, you loved hard. I mean, it's an age-old story. Think about Romeo and Juliet. I mean, you loved hard at that age. And Christian was on the bridge. And what I don't understand, Reverend Al and Senator Liu, you look at the video. I mean, they had cleared the bridge completely. There were no cars, no people, no nothing on the bridge. I mean, they had cleared the bridge. You had people on the underpass down below, but literally, he was on that bridge by himself. And the police were called, Reverend Al, while this young Chinese teenager was having a mental health crisis to help him. They were supposed to help the situation. He needed a helping hand. But what they gave him was bullets when he had his hands up. I mean, and you don't have to take Ben Crump's word for it or Reverend Allen's word for it, State Senator Liu's word for it. Go look at the video for yourself and see that young man with his hands up and the State Highway Patrol in Pennsylvania shoot multiple times. And it's just asinine because he's on the bridge by himself and you're supposed to be trying to save his life. But you come and kill him? I mean, all you had to do was just keep your perimeter and keep trying to talk them. Because they say when people are contemplating suicide, what they're really doing is making a cry for help. That's what Christian was doing. He was making a cry for help. And you came and gave him bullets. And the fact that after you shoot him, it is so heartbreaking. After you shoot him, unjustifiably, you see an armored police car roll up. And so you have to ask yourself, Dominique, was there a less intrusive way they could have handled the matter instead of using excessive force of putting bullets in this young man's body to handle the situation? Who was in harm's way besides Christian? I mean, I'm not being Jewish doctrine, intellectual, anything. I'm just making a common sense argument. I'm asking a layman's question, like they asked with George Floyd. Take your knee off his neck. Why are you doing that to him? So I'm asking the same for Christian Hall. Why? Why did you feel you had to shoot him? If you're in an armored truck, nobody's in harm's way, nobody on that bridge. Can you imagine how lonely Christian felt on that bridge? And so I think about when we stood up for George Floyd, we stood up for Jacob Blake, we stood up for Breonna Taylor, we stood up for Trayvon Martin, we stood up for Michael Brown, we stood up for 12-year-old Tamir Rice, we stood up for so many who were killed unjustifiably. And the only difference between them and Christian Hall is his skin color. And if we're gonna be people who stand against bias of any kind, just like we stood up for George, just like we stood up for Breonna, just like we stood up for Ahmaud, just like we stood up for Jacob Blake Jr., we gotta stand up for Christian Hall because he's our brother too. He is our brother too. Christian Hall deserves justice. Christian Hall matters. 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 And I'll let Rev, do you want to say something?
Just really briefly. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. This is emotional for me. I'm here because my cousin and his wife are devastated. They'll be there tomorrow, but Christian Hall's life did matter. This was my cousin. I spoke with him weekly, and we cannot let his life be swept under the rug. We need your help, and we appreciate all of your support. Thank you so much.
Give her a big hand. Christian Hall matters. Christian Hall matters. Come on.
Christian Hall matters.
I don't hear you.
Christian Hall matters.
Louder.
Christian Hall matters.
One more time.
Christian Hall matters.
All right. So 2 o'clock tomorrow, we're gonna meet Attorney Crump and the family down at Foley Square. We have started the appeal today with John Liu, but we're gonna put legs to that appeal tomorrow at Foley Square. And I want his family to know that we'll be there with them tomorrow and any other tomorrow. Police choked Eric Gardner to death 7 years ago. And Miss Carr will tell you we're still with her. We don't, once we get in a case, we there for the long run. It doesn't matter how long it takes. This young man, stand up again. In fact, Corey did 13 years in jail as one of the Central Park Five. A lot of folk don't know this, Attorney Crump. He did 13 years. Falsely accused, coerced about a rape he didn't commit, about a vicious rape. Now, it happened, but they didn't do it in Central Park. His mother and the mother of two of his others co-defendants came to me. No one would stand up for them but a few activists. I went to court with them and they talked about us like a dog. When they got convicted, we stayed in touch with their family. A man in jail, Ray McGuire, talking to his cellmate, said, you know, them guys in Central Park, this is many years later now, 13 years later, you know they really didn't do that, I did. Jailhouse bragging. His cellmate trying to get out of jail, trying to cut a deal for himself, told on what the guy told him. Some of y'all been to joint, know y'all do anything to get out. That's what happened. All of y'all ain't holy in here. Y'all done So the jailhead snitch told on the guy. They took the guy out of jail, Crystal, and did a DNA test and found out the guy matched with the DNA they took from the woman 14 years earlier in Central Park. That's how they exonerated the Central Park Five, which also meant if they took the DNA and matched it 14 years later, that they knew that DNA didn't match 14 years before. Even though they may not have known who it matched, they knew who it did not match. And they locked them 5 black young men, black and brown young men up, knowing the evidence didn't connect them. That's why I answer the call. Sometimes you got to stand up, even if you got to stand up by yourself. When Kerry Weiss got out, and he did more time than any of them because he was older. He was 16, and they tried him as an adult. When he got out, his mother came, brought him to me. And he said, all I want to do is thank you. And his mother said, the other problem we got in revenue is we can't get him a job. Because where are you going to get a job when you just done 13 years in jail for rape? Couldn't finish school. Where is he going? And she said, can you make some connection to get him a job? I said, yeah, he can work right here. And he worked at National Action Network for 3 years until he got his settlement. And they got a big settlement. But let me tell you the difference between some folks. Kerry Weiss got a big settlement and has been here every Saturday since he got his settlement. Never left the movement. Some folks don't understand that unless you fight for everybody, you can't fight for anybody.
There you go.
I see what Attorney Hardy has done with Legal Night, where 106,000 people watched last month, where people are in need. And I don't care what you call yourself, Cardinal, Archbishop, Super Bishop, Double Elder, whatever you call yourself. It don't matter if you're not serving the people. God didn't call you to get a big title. God called you to serve the people. The Bible said, if you love me, feed my sheep. And that's what we're supposed to do. Well, remember, hard to feed the sheep. It ain't hard if you got faith. And only the fact of the matter is that the only way you're going to do this work is if you got faith. And faith is not what you can figure out. Faith is not the end of a calculated plan. Faith is not when you know what this is going to all amount to. Faith is when it don't make sense. Faith is when you can't figure it out. Faith is when the strategy ain't working. But you know he wouldn't have brought me this far to leave me now. That's why I like that special on the black church. We did not come with education. It used to be against the law for us to read and write. Education didn't make us. We didn't come this way with money. We worked for 300 years and never got paid. We didn't have any money. We come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord, trusting in his holy word. He never, from the outhouse to the White House, he never failed me yet. Only time that we ever faltered is when we got weak on our faith. They tell the story in the Bible about when Jesus fed the multitudes. Took 2 little fishes, few loaves of bread. But right after that, watermen will tell you, they went out to go off into another place. And the Bible said that the disciples and Jesus was going to the other side on the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus told them, y'all go ahead, I'll come behind. Stayed alone to pray and meditate by himself. And the disciples got on the boat, Ben Crump, going to the other side on the Sea of Galilee. And they said out of nowhere some wind came. A storm came on the sea and was about to turn the boat over. But they looked through in the storm. They looked through the wind. And they saw Jesus walking on the water. And Peter yelled at Jesus and said, Master, call for me to come unto you. And Peter stepped out and walked on the water. And when the wind blew, Peter looked down and started sinking. You don't sink till you start looking down. The reason some of us ended up with Donald Trump is we started looking down. He had given us Obama, but we looked down. But don't worry, when we look back up, the Bible said when he looked back up, Jesus grabbed him. When we look back up, we went from Trump to Kamala Harris. If we don't lose our faith, God will make a way out of no way. He opened doors that no one can open, shut doors that no one can shut. Up, you mighty race. Quit whipping. Quit feeling sorry for yourself. Up, you mighty race. You can. You can. You can if you will. Never would have made it. Never would have made it. 13 years in jail, never would have made it. Brother with the knee on the neck, never would have made it. Without you. Give me one verse of that and we going home.
Never would have made it.
Never would have made it.
Never would have made it without you. I would have lost it all. But now I see you were there for me. And I'm stronger. I'm wiser. I'm better. So much better. When I look back over all you brought me through, I can see that you were the one I held on to.
Everybody's singing. Everybody's singing. Everybody's singing. Sing it like you mean it. Sing it like you mean it. Sing it like you mean it. We want justice. We want freedom. Everybody's singing. Sing for Eric Gardner. Sing for Trayvon. Sing it for George Floyd. I'm open the doors of the movement. There may be someone here today that never joined.